Win big in 2024 with RotoBaller.com's MLB Premium Pass. It includes our preseason draft kit, 15 exclusive lineup tools, and the Team Sync platform. Get customized rankings for your specific league format. Sync your leagues with Team Sync and use our new live draft assistant. Then get customized advice for your scoring settings. Get a discount for any MLB Premium Pass using my promo code Knuckler, KNUCKLERRA Dickey style. Just visit rotoballer.com, sign up today, and start rotoballing like a boss. And the fantasy baseball season is right around the corner, so get on that. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral link and my referral code RotoBrady. You get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus, getting those player prop parlay contests. There's paid contests, there's free contests coming to a state near you. That's a great platform. Check it out. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 124 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast, Tap That. And we've got UFC 298 this weekend. Now, there's some other MMA action going on. One fight night on Friday, KSW 91. But light week overall in MMA. Not like 8 UFC Fight Pass events like there was the last few weeks. You can find my picks for all other MMA promotions on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me there. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Like, subscribe, comment, leave favorable reviews, and tell your friends. The card, I believe, pops off at 6:30 p.m. in Anaheim, California this weekend. I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 4 to 5 p.m. doing the weekly DFS/sports betting Q&A. Show up. Let's talk about UFC 298. Speaking of talking about UFC 298, with me today, frequent guest co-host on Tap That. Give it up for Connor Bones Slone. Connor, how's it going tonight?
It's going great, man. I am just looking forward to this weekend. We got quite a Saturday of fights, don't we?
And dude, it was like the last fight nights have been fine. They've been good events that I was looking forward to. Any UFC event on a Saturday is always something to get you through the week. But this string of UFC 298, 299, and then 300 is going to blow the door off the barn.
Absolutely. And before we jump into any predictions, do you got any for 298? You got any predictions for the main event of 300?
Dude, I don't. I don't know what it'll be. I don't think it'll be exactly I've seen Hamzat Leon thrown around a lot, Dreykus and Izzy, Dreykus and Sean. I've seen all those kinds of combinations thrown around. I know they were reportedly trying to get John Jones for that. I have no idea what it's going to be. I would be shocked if it didn't involve a combination of at least one or two of the guys that I just mentioned. It's just crazy that Hamzat is a guy that can so seamlessly transition from being in the title talk at 170 and 185 pounds. It's got to be a dream because he's also, his star power is so big internationally. What do you think is going to be the 300 main event?
Well, I would love for it to be Hamzat as much as I don't want to say I dislike him, but I dislike some of his antics. But I don't think it's going to be him. I think he came out and said, "There's no way I'm fighting during Ramadan." So I doubt it's going to be him. And he also has some problems getting his visa with the U.S. for some reason. I think it's because he hangs out with that Chechnyan dictator, which we won't dive too deep into. But I think it's so. I think Dana said he was going to announce it at 298 at the press conference, the post-fight press conference. I think it's going to be one of those ones that he just kind of mentions in passing and then moves on. Because I think it's going to be Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad. And you know me, I love Bilal Muhammad. I think he deserves a title shot, but that would be kind of a lame main event for 300 as much as I love him.
That's the thing is that if Bilal got a title shot next, I would not be upset about it at all. That's what happens when you win a bunch of fights in a row. Eventually, it's like, look, if 8 wins in a row, 10, whatever, that different guys get to, even though they're boring. If that's not enough to get you a title shot, then why are we even having these fights? And what's the point of rank? So you have to give someone a title shot at a certain point. But for UFC 300, I never thought that was going to be the main event because. But, Bilal has managed to make himself so hated that I think at least people would pay attention.
I totally agree. And I think the biggest problem here is that Dana's been just hyping it up so much and so much. And he has, a really solid amount of fights on that card. I think if they move forward today with just what's on the card, it wouldn't be a disappointing card. But just the way Dana has been hyping up the main event, like, dude, come on, you don't even have it booked yet. Quit hyping it up. You don't know what's gonna happen.
And it always like it gets me excited. I can't help it. Like when he's acting like he knows something that we don't. I mean, because he does, because he's the because he's the one making those decisions. But like when he gets excited, it's hard to not like think of all the possibilities. I just don't think these situations almost never end up being exactly what we expect. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the card on my bachelor party weekend with the Hamzat and Nate situation, where it's
God, that was a clusterfuck. That was crazy.
it's like what? And so I don't know. I have no idea what it's going to be. I think that I'll be excited for the fight that they make no matter what, because even if it's a boring matchup, you're still going to get worst case scenario is that it's Leon Belail. Honestly, like that's a great fight that just doesn't scream to you that that is a big money pay-per-view event. But I wouldn't be disappointed with that at all. It's still a good fight. But I don't I have no idea. And as for Hamzat, credit to he's to knock or to beat Kamaru Usman at middleweight and be promised the middleweight title shot. Like it's pretty ideal for him moving forward. Like his next fight is either going to be a big money fight or it's going to be a title shot at one weight class or another or both. And as far as being a dictator, I don't want to judge anybody on that because I've never been approached by a dictator before asking me to be friends with him. I have no idea how I would say no to that. Wouldn't you be a little nervous to say no to that?
Yeah, I think Hamzat also has some family where that dictator rules. So like, it's kind of hard to fault him, but at the same time, we probably should fault him. I don't know. We won't dive too deep into that, but um, I don't know if anyone listening has any thoughts, feel free to throw them my way. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, and MMA, the MMA internet is, chock full of opinions on Hamzat anyway.
Hmm.
Connor, we got 12 fights for UFC 298, uh, including a title fight. I originally named this episode the Costa Success, but then I realized that that was what episode number 43 was named. So I called it the Costa Success 2 Paulo Boogaloo. So, part of the card too.
Somebody save him, because I don't want to see him with the 40-year-old gold digging European.
Ian Gary is on this card too. We'll get to that in a second. I also just wanted to play that song by Tyler Cassidy. If you haven't heard that, check it out. Credit to that guy. Just wanted to play a short clip, but it rolls through my head all week when I start singing it. So 12 fights on the card, starting from the top to the bottom. The featherweight title fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Elia Topuria. Connor, Volk is the minus 125 favorite right now.
Yeah.
I jumped on it. And Illyria is still the plus 105 underdog. I jumped on that very quickly. And the initial reaction is always, like when you see a guy that's undefeated and is coming in devastating people like Elia has been, with his last fight against Josh Emmett, outstriking him 152 to 87, 3 takedowns and a knockdown en route to a unanimous decision. He finished Bryce Mitchell with an arm triangle in round 2 of December 2022. Before that, not a bunch of activity really for him. His best wins are Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett. The Josh Emmett win somehow keeps looking better over time. Volk, on the other hand, the only guy that has beaten him ever in the UFC is named Islam Makhachev, and that was for the lightweight championship of the world. The last time we saw him out at featherweight, got the 3rd round knockout against Yair Rodriguez. This is a guy that holds 3 wins over Max Holloway, the last being by far the most dominant. The 4th round knockout over Chan Sung Young, the absolute domination of Brian Ortega. I all the credit to Elijah Perry in the world, and I love his confidence. I love the promotional video he put out with that rose. It was sick. But I see no reason for why I should not opt with a lot on Alexander Volkanovski minus 125. I think he wins this fight still 75 times out of 100 at least. What do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely think taking Volk at minus 125 is the smart thing to do. But I kind of see this fight going one of two ways. it's either going to be the undefeated up and comer getting checked by the champ and in a very good performance, or we're going to see Ilia Topuria really come into himself and beat a guy who may be slightly over the hill. I don't want to say that he is, because we haven't really seen that, but he's getting up there in age. Apparently he was drinking every day when he took the Islam Makhachev fight, which he, to be fair, is on short notice, but I feel like if you're a world champion athlete, you probably should be drinking every day to start. Someone tell that to Paulo Costa too. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a much closer fight than people anticipate. I think just in terms of style, Ilia Topuria matches up really well with Volkanovski. So I think it's going to be a close fight. I think it's going to be a war over 5 rounds. I give the edge to Volk, so I definitely think taking him at minus 125 is a smart move. But I think Ilia is going to have a little bit more for him than anyone else has in the past, and more than people think. So I think it's a great matchup. I think it's at the right time. Volkanovski is still probably in his prime. I don't want to say for sure because I don't really know. Topuria is obviously up and coming in his prime. So I mean, Volkanovski is the safe bet, but if you want to try to hit a bigger number, I don't know, maybe Topuria by decision.
And minus 125 is actually such a good number that I have to ignore all the other things that might come into play against Alexander Volkanovski. Because at the end of the day, when a guy is undefeated coming in with at least wins over the guys at the level of Bryce Mitchell and Josh Emmett, you start to say, like, one of these guys you got to think is eventually going to dethrone him at featherweight. He's been dominant for so long. But the number is so good that I have to opt with the guy that very well might be, the best pound for pound fighter in the world still. I don't care necessarily about any of the reasons that, he might not have been in best form against Islam Makhachev. I will say that a knockout like that, we've seen so many times, especially when a fighter is getting up there in age, it changes you for the rest of your career. And it starts, the slope down. So I am all about going, Volkanovski by decision plus 240, even though I love minus 125 overall. Volk by split decision or majority decision is plus 1,000.
I might throw some money on that. That's how I won a bunch of money with the Jake Paul Tyron Woodley fight. Put Jake Paul by a split decision, and it was like plus 2,500.
You can always do split decision in a boxing match, even if it's a dominant performance by one fighter. But
exactly
but Elia is, they don't have the number up for him by TKO knockout right now, but that is actually where I would go with him. Just because I think if you're thinking that he's going to win this fight, I think part of that you have to accept is that Volk is a different fighter now after the Islam Makhachev losses. So if that is the case, I think that's where, because if it's a 5-round fight, I think you have to favor the cardio of Volk. But if I'm going a lot, I'm going by TKO knockout. And that bet is on, Volk being, well past his prime at his age and, having taken these 2 losses so recently.
Yeah, now that you say that and explain your reasoning, I actually agree with you. Yeah, I don't think if Ilya gets it done, it'll be by decision, because Volk's cardio is just crazy, assuming he hasn't lost any of that. So yeah, I guess either Volk minus 125 is a very good bet. And if you want to, try to hit that higher number, maybe Volk by decision or Topuria by KO.
And in DFS, for sure, Alexander Volkanovski is going to probably be in every single one of my lineups, if not the captain, in all formats where that is available. Next up, in the co-main event of the evening, a middleweight matchup between the number 5 and number 9 middleweights in the world, according to Topology.com. Connor, a fight I know you're looking forward to because of how much you love Paulo Costa, but he's facing Robert Whittaker on Saturday. Paulo Costa is the plus 205 underdog. Robert Whittaker, the minus 250 favorite. Kind of similar narrative here, Connor, in that, the only guy that had ever been able to hold a candle to Robert Whittaker since, he was at middleweight and fighting at his best and fighting the best in the world at every single fight. He occupied a tier of his own in the middleweight division for years and years, where Izzy floated above the rest. Robert Whittaker would have been a dominant champion probably in that period in his own right had Israel Adesanya not existed. And now, last time out, the huge upset loss to Dricus Du Plessis that led to Dricus' title shot. We had always seen Robert Whittaker with the iron chin, the great, durability, and, to get knocked out by what's the word for Dricus? Rustic? Chaotic.
Unconventional, maybe.
It like unconventional, yeah. If Dreykus takes wild shots, Dreykus gets tired. At least he was at that period of time in his career. And to see him get knocked out by Dreykus was a shock to everybody. Paulo Costa, on the other hand, he is coming off of. All right. So Paulo has struggled with activity levels in 2017. Everybody joking this week about the fact that this fight isn't canceled yet. So his last 3 wins, Connor, are Uriah Hall, Yoel Romero, both of those before 2020, and Luke Rockhold, August of 2022. That was now August of 2022. And that was a close fight still. Rockhold had his moments. That was fought at altitude. I understand, but that was a sloppy fight. That Costa won, but Rockhold had his moments in. 2 losses in between there by second round knockout to Israel Adesanya at UFC 253 and by unanimous decision to Marvin Vettori October of 2021. Dude, I never really bought into Paulo past a certain point in the UFC. A win, the Romero fight was pretty under, that's a win he got. That was a good one, but still with Yoel, it was hard to him and Paulo were the guys that were on that tier underneath Robert Whitaker for years. But they never came up big in those wins that could have elevated them to the next level. And with his last win being Luke Rockhold, and that's his only win in 5 years, almost 5 years, I think I have to opt for Robert Whitaker, even with the questions that I have. And if I'm going Robert Whitaker, I think that he probably wins 70 to 75 of these fights out of 100. Minus 250, I think that's about a very appropriate number. Whitaker by decision, though, plus 110. That's what I'm hitting.
Yeah, I gotta disagree with you a little bit on a couple things. I think primarily the Rockhold fight. So, it's easy to take a look at that fight and say, yeah, it was sloppy. Rockhold had his moments, and it should have been a more impressive win for Costa. But I think Rockhold is an amazing fighter. He with the weak chin. Paulo Costa has never been really one of those one-shot KO guys. He's more of a volume striker, and I think he did really good in the Rockhold fight when it comes to grappling. He out-grappled Rockhold, which is definitely not an easy thing to do, no matter what his age is, no matter what the altitude is. So he actually impressed me in that fight a bit more than I think other people, because it is easy to look at that fight and say he couldn't finish Rockhold. Everyone else can. But, some fighters just come in and they channel their inner prime for one last fight. And that's what Rockhold did, man. He came out there ready to fight, and Costa still took it to him, took him down, took his back, out-grappled him, outstruck him. So I was impressed by that fight, even though, but you do make a good point. That was 2022. Haven't seen him in a while, but I do think that I don't know, just on the side of Whitaker, and don't get me wrong, I do love Paulo Costa. I also love Robert Whitaker. I'd say I probably love Costa a little bit more, but that damage is going to catch up to you eventually. I think it's, what's going to be the bigger detractor here? Is it lack of activity, or is it having, 2 brutal wars with Yoel Romero and then getting knocked out by Dreykus du Plessis, and, also getting knocked out by Israel, and then having a fight against him where he didn't take that much damage, but he still took some damage. So I don't know. I like Costa in this fight at plus 205. I think if he comes in shape, focused, like he did against Rockhold. He looked in great shape against Rockhold. It was a high altitude. His cardio held up pretty well. I don't know. I'm gonna take Costa in this.
But what if I also told you that Luke Rockhold had 1 win since December of 2015, and it was against David Branch? And
yeah, I mean, you can tell me whatever you want to about Rockhold. I'm gonna say he's still a good fighter.
he was 38 at the time of that fight. That's a huge issue for me. Rockhold with being finished as many times as he was. I was just really concerned that at times in that fight, Paulo was gonna win, but they were both so tired, you thought if one of them fell on the other's fist the wrong way, that one of them might have gone down. So, maybe I didn't see as much of Paulo Costa in that fight as I would have liked to, but I in terms of I don't know what I learned about him from the next fight, but it's been 1.5 years since that. So I gotta go Robert Whitaker by decision plus 110, but both of these guys have major question marks attached to them. Yet this is still a very meaningful fight at middleweight.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I definitely respect your opinion here. I just disagree a bit. I think Costa, as an underdog, that's a good take. What's Costa by decision? I'm sure that's probably a crazy number.
Let's see. Costa by decision plus 650.
Yeah, I might put a little bit of money on that. We'll see though. Maybe it's my love for Costa blinding me because he's the funniest MMA fighter there is. You see that Instagram post he had that said petition to kill Costa if he pulls out this time, and he was like, "I'm signing."
He's funny.
He's hilarious.
But like also, I can't dispel the influence it might have had on me when Izzy from the Octagon called Paulo Costa a puffed up balloon animal, and then Panda Paulo, and he's wearing that like super tight shiny shirt. And so that has always probably affected me a little. It was the one time Israel Adesanya actually like did well with his trash talk.
Yeah, you remember when he also said Costa was going to crumble like the Twin Towers, and he had to apologize for it?
Jesus Christ, he's so bad at that.
Yeah, dude.
Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Jeff Hands of Steel Neal and Ian Gary. Ian Machado Gary, the minus 230 favorite. Jeff Neal, the plus 190 underdog. Jeff Neal, Hands of Steel with a Z. 2 wins out of his last 3 fights, including a win by third round knockout over Vicente Luque. In a split decision against Santiago Ponzinibbio before that, in what was a close fight. He got dominated by Shavkat Rakhmonov the last time out, March of 2023 at UFC 285. But has lost 3 of his last 5 fights because before the Ponzinibbio fight, he had 2 straight unanimous decision losses where he got outstruck and outgrappled by Neil Magny and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So, you look at Jeff Neal, as devastating as his power has proven at times. His best wins are Mike Perry, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and Vicente Luque. And, it's been like that level of competition. When you jump up to guys that start to be like, in the rankings or a little bit higher than top 15, that's when he starts to have trouble. And Ian Gary has had an interesting year. He became real famous in the last 365 days. There's been a lot of conversation about it. Ian Gary's not listening to the Instagram comments anymore. But I know that like as much as people have weirdly taken to loving Sean Strickland, so too have people taken to continuously hating Ian Gary for all the weird, and they got their beef too. But Ian Gary, his best win is Neil Magny, where he did dominate Neil Magny at UFC 292 August of last year. Knocked out Danny Rodriguez in May of 2023. Also, wins against Gabe Green and Darian Weeks, I do not think are to be slept on. This does seem like a fight where Ian Gary should take it, even though, like, if the number was like plus 240 for Jeff Neal, I'd probably be on that a little bit more. But, even with the gaps or, the flaws that we do see in Ian Gary's game, even though I find him to be like an uncomfortable personality and whatever it is, he is good. You can't, like, the optics on him, despite the flaw, if you just focus on the good stuff, the optics are fantastic. And I think that he's only working that out. The question is, for a guy like that, like, how much has the last year been a real distraction, especially when you've had so many fights fall through? This is a guy that we have seen rocked in the past before by Song Ki-nan. Usually Ian Gary's the one landing the knockdowns, but we have seen him get put in some tough situations across these different fights. He's continued to evolve, but if you do fall asleep on Jeff Neal and you're not focused, that is a guy that can hurt you very quickly. I think that like Ian Gary minus 230, I think that that's about the right number too. I think he probably wins this fight like, I don't know, 65, 70 times out of 100. I think that like he just is in a better position to control this fight on the feet, as even if it means that he gets hurt a couple of times throughout the fight or it touched real good. I think that those are rounds that he still wins. Gary by decision is plus 150. Gary by knockout is plus 250. I think I probably favor decision just a little bit more with it being 3 rounds and all. Jeff Neal by TKO knockout is, I think, where you go with that, and that's plus 350. But I think that that's actually the best prop of the fight. But this is a tough one to bet overall because, again, if you were getting Neal at some crazy number, then that's something I would take a look at because we still don't know all that there is to know about Ian Gary at this level to be that confident in him. But right now, I think I have to opt for Ian Gary as the rightful favorite because he does look like a guy that is going to be moving up this welterweight division.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another one that I respect your opinion on, but I have to disagree just a little bit here. So, um, first, I think the fight with Shavkat and Jeff Neal, I think that showed us a lot about Jeff Neal, and I don't think he got dominated in that fight. Shavkat definitely got a good finish, but Jeff Neal definitely had quite a few good moments. He hit him with a few big shots that Shavkat was able to eat, but he got racked a couple times. Ian Gary getting dropped by Keenan Song, I think Jeff Neal is going to be able to capitalize on Ian Gary's gaps in his defense. There aren't a lot, but there are some. And Neal has hands. His hands of steel is a very accurate name for him. So I'm going Jeff Neal by TKO, and I think it might be one of those cases where you're right that 70 out of 100 times Ian Gary wins, but I think Saturday is going to be one of those 30 times. I think I don't know if it's going to attribute it all to the factor that Ian Gary has gone through a media circus recently, but he does seem like someone that you're able to get under his skin pretty easily, and I think that might affect his mentality. But who knows? I guess we'll find out.
And I think for DFS, I think both these guys are in play just for the finishing potential or the high strike volume potential. I don't know. The Kenan Song fight is an outlier, I think. He was able to put D-Rod away early, and Neil Magny was never really able to get anything off on him. Neil
Yeah.
Magny, it's a way different kind of fighter. So I do think Ian Gary is going to be tested in this fight. But, he's one guy that I think, kind of like Sean O'Malley, in a way that, as that guy keeps rising, he's going to lose eventually.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to give him a big fight that he's not ready for. But that's what we thought about Sean Malley versus Petr Yan too. But it's the sneaky fights that get you sometimes. And I don't know if this Jeff Neal fight is sneaky enough to get Ian Gary like Cheeto Vera did to Sean O'Malley. But I think that this is a guy that at every step that he takes next, and it's hard to say if he's that kind of guy like Sean O'Malley, but at every next step, I think people are going to keep coming up with reasons for why they don't think it's for real until that guy might be the welterweight champion. I'm not saying that's going to happen, super soon or anything, but do you look at a guy like Ian Gary and think that he has all the potential in the world to be the champion at 170?
Not at the current moment, but I will tell you, if he beats Jeff Neal, I will start to come around that way. I do agree that I think if Ian Gary wins here, there are going to be a lot of people that still write him off until he gets that massive win. But I think beating Jeff Neal is not an easy task, and I think if Ian Gary gets it done, I'm going to be a believer, even though I don't like him very much.
Next up, we got a bantamweight fight that could be a main event on many other weekends. Merab Dvalishvili against Henry Triple C Cejudo. These guys are ranked, it doesn't really matter what they're ranked bantamweight in the world, just because, it does for Merab, but it doesn't necessarily for Cejudo with the kind of, weird stretch he's had over the last few years. Cejudo, the plus 185 underdog, Merab, the minus 225 favorite. Let's start with Cejudo. He won 6 fights in a row from September 2017 to May of 2020. Wilson Reyes, Sergio Pettis, Demetrius Johnson, TJ Dillashaw, Marlon Moraes, and Dominic Cruz all fell prey. He took 3 years off, almost exactly 3 years off, comes back, loses a split decision that I do think that he rightfully lost against Aljamain Sterling, May of 2023, where he landed 99 strikes and 3 takedowns. Aljo landed 135 and 4 takedowns. Merab, 4 years younger. He will have a 4-inch reach advantage. Merab has not lost in the UFC since April of 2018. He lost his first 2 in the UFC and has not lost since then. An original product of Dana White looking for a fight His best win, he's got wins over Brad Katona, Casey Kinney, Gustavo Lopez, John Dodson, Cody Stamen. Last 3. And it's been a fight per year for, the last, no, I guess he had 2 in 2021. But Marlon Moraes by second round knockout, Jose Aldo by unanimous decision. Last time out, he looked fantastic. March of 2023 with a unanimous decision win over Petr Yan, outstriking him 147-75 and taking him down 11 times to 1. This is a hard one to figure out because Merab and Aljo, I don't know exactly what that means for this, fight. It's not like Merab has a revenge quality to him, because Cejudo lost to Aljo. But Merab looked really, really good against Petr Yan. But Petr Yan, has now lost 4 of his last 5 fights. Granted, against the best competition in the world at bantamweight, but that's still the case. And Cejudo, I think, clearly lost that fight against Aljamain Sterling. Not that it wasn't a close fight, but I didn't have any doubt as to who I thought won on the scorecards. And then you got a 3-year gap in between, him being the best at bantamweight for, at least 2 years to that loss against Aljo. I think I have to give a slight edge to Merab. I think I have to go like Merab, I don't know, 65 times out of 100. But minus 225, I don't think is the right number. And so Cejudo at plus 185, I actually think is the better pick. What do you think about this? Because it's weird taking the guy that had the long layoff against a guy that's just been dominant over, such a long stretch like Merab.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not trying to say anything bad about Merab. He's a great fighter. Seems like a cool guy, but I think his style will not bode well against Cejudo. His style of pressuring a ton, wrestling a ton. Cejudo's got great cardio. He's a great wrestler, and I think Merab was so dominant against someone like Petr Yan because that style is just a nightmare for Petr Yan. But I think if he comes in and fights the same fight, pressures, looks for takedowns, I think Cejudo is gonna work him. I think Cejudo's gonna get his knees active. He has great knees, and I'm taking Cejudo all day in this. And it might be the case that 3-year layoff really hurts Cejudo, but I don't think Cejudo is that type of fighter. I think a 3-year layoff is gonna actually do wonders for him, and he's gonna come in sharp. He's always had a good chin. His chin's gonna hold up, and I give Cejudo the edge here definitely.
And I think it goes Cejudo by decision plus 350. That seems like a great number.
Yeah, I would maybe consider Cejudo by knockout. I think if he can throw knees up the middle, kind of like did against Marlon Rice, I think that'll do some work to Merab. So, but yeah, I mean Cejudo in general, he's a great pick as an underdog. So that's probably what I'll go for. I mean, maybe do a parlay with Cejudo, Jeff Neal, and Paulo Costa, and come back to me when you win.
That's a fun idea. There's so many there's going to be so many good parlay ideas over the next 3 pay-per-views. Next up, we have a middleweight matchup between Anthony Fluffy Hernandez and Roman Kopylov. Kopylov is the plus 210 underdog. Anthony Hernandez the minus 258 favorite. Hernandez, winner of 4 in a row and 5 out of his last 6, with the only loss being to Kevin Holland. He got a sub win over Jung Young Park, a sub against Rodolfo Vieira, which is not easy to do. Unanimous decision over Josh Fremd. I barely count that. And then 2 straight 3rd-round finishes against Marc-Andre Barriault and Edmund Shabazian. Kopylov. They each have the same reach, by the way. Not to be slight. Kopylov actually 2 years older. After a rough start to his UFC career with 2 losses in a row to Carl Robertson and Albert Duraev, he has bounced back with 4 straight wins, all by knockout. 1 in round 3 against Alessio Di Chirico, and the other 3 in round 2 against Punahele Soriano, Claudio Ribeiro, and Josh Fremd. My first instinct on this is that I like both guys from a DFS perspective, and I think that there's props that you could go with for either of these 2 guys that make a lot of sense. I think Kopylov wins this fight maybe 40 times out of 100. I think right now we know less about the ceiling maybe of Kopylov than Hernandez. And, maybe maybe it's the complete inverse, because both these guys are, really exciting and have, been on good winning streaks. But I think, like, if you're betting either of these guys, Kopylov plus 210, I think is fine because I do think he wins like maybe 40 of these out of 100. But Kopylov by TKO knockout, that's plus 350. I think that is a solid selection. Hernandez by sub because, Kopylov is going to be takeable on the ground if Hernandez can get past Kopylov's hands and get him there. And Hernandez by submission is plus 180. What say you on this middleweight matchup?
Yeah, I agree with both your picks. I think those are definitely the two best betting options. I mean, it's hard for me to pick a fourth underdog in a row, but I might have to. Kopylov has really impressed me. Anthony Hernandez is a great fighter too, though. I think this one's a tough one to call, but I'm leaning Kopylov.
Next up, we got a women's strawweight matchup between Amanda Lemos and Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern is the plus 114 underdog. Lemos the minus 135 favorite. Let's start with Amanda Lemos. Winner of 2 of her last 3, dating back to July of 2022. Submission win over Michelle Waterson Gomez. Everybody loves the karate hottie. And the 3rd round knockout over Marina Rodriguez. She lost a unanimous decision to Zhang Wei Li at UFC 292, August of last year, getting pieced up 163 to 24, knocked down once, and taken down 6 times. Mackenzie Dern killed me last time out. I was somehow, after the Angela Hill win, somehow I was ready to jump on board the Mackenzie Dern train. Why? I have resisted that up to this point. She had the 4-fight winning streak from May of 2020 to April of 2021 that included names like Ronda Marcos, Bruna Jandiroba, and Nina Nunes. Losses, 3 of her last 5 against Marina Rodriguez, Yan Xiaonan, and Andrade. Thoroughly worked by Yan Xiaonan in that fight, despite the fact that, Dern did have some really, really good submission attempts. Why do I feel like it's always enticing to try to go for like Mackenzie Dern by submission. But it's different when Mackenzie Dern is trying to armbar you, as opposed to a fighter like Jessica Andrade with the strength that she has, locking you into an arm triangle. There's different kinds of submission threats. And I just don't know if Amanda Lemos is going to be, at risk against Mackenzie Dern in the same way that she was in the past. Granted, I guess that is the biggest problem, is that Mackenzie Dern's 2 wins, over the last 3 years have been Tisha Torres and Angela Hill. So I question Mackenzie Dern against this level of, against a fighter as durable as Amanda Lemos, because we haven't seen those fights end up well for her. So I'm going to resist the urge again to jump on the Mackenzie Dern by submission train, especially when, her last 2 wins, which came in the last, 3 or 4 years, were by decision. So I think Amanda Lemos wins this fight like 55 to 60 times out of 100. So give me minus 135. And, I could see Lemos by TKO knockout at plus 165 being a really good number. I guess if you do go Dern, I go by decision plus 400. Then I go by submission plus 250. What do you think about this fight? Because any fight that Mackenzie Dern is in turns into a really interesting, like, stylistic analysis.
Yeah, I think I agree with mostly everything you said. I'm definitely taking Lemos in this one. I saw somewhere that Mackenzie Dern is training out of her garage for this fight. And unless your name is Ray Cooper, that is not going to work well for you. So I don't think she's going to come in ready to fight someone like Lemos, and I think she's gonna lose. I think Lemos by knockouts probably the best pick for her to win, but maybe her by decision as well. But yeah, I'm taking Lemos all day.
Isn't it interesting that when you hear those things, the further that you move into somebody's house, the more concerning that it is? Like, if you're training in your garage, it's like, that's weird. If you're training in your living room, it's like, oh my God, Mark Coleman is going to get destroyed. If you're training in your basement, it's like, what is Bob Sapp doing?
Training in your bedroom.
Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup between Marcus Rogerio de Lima and Justin Tafa. Justin Tafa is the plus 124 underdog. Rogerio de Lima, the minus 148 favorite. To start off with Marcus Rogerio de Lima, a guy that in any other fight, and it's so tough because if you were asking me after the Waldo Cortez Acosta fight, I'm throwing $500 on Marcus Rogerio de Lima. I might be exaggerating there, but it's like in this kind of fight where you have a weakness in overall mixed martial arts, that's Marcus Rogerio de Lima all day. After the Derek Lewis fight, where he gets knocked out, and there's been all those stories about his teeth moving when he eats and his jaw being messed up. That is not what you want to hear before you're about to fight Justin Tafa. So the Waldo Cortez Acosta fight was like, oh, this is still what Marcus Rogerio de Lima does to people. Keeps striking close enough, gets you down on the ground, doesn't do anything special, but hammers you with ground and pound and some submission threats throughout the fight. And, he ends up with a win if you're not, past number 13 ranked in the world a lot of the time. Justin Tafa, winner of 3 of his last 4 fights, including 2 in 2023, both by first round knockout, though it was against the likes of Parker Porter and Austin Lane. The third win before that, which was his only one for a bit, like in over a year. So he only has 4 wins in the UFC. There's been a lot of losing, and it's never been against a great level of competition. I think the best win that he has is Parker Porter. He also knocked out former Tap That guest and Kentucky native Harry Hunsucker December of 2021. Connor, I think that it's a trick. I think that they like Tafa plus 124. I think that this is still within Marcus Rogerio de Lima's range quite easily. I think that just his skill as an overall mixed martial artist, I don't want to get spooked by, the stories about his teeth and what a loss to Derek Lewis does to you. Because Derek Lewis is not Justin Tafa. And I think Marcus Rogerio de Lima does exactly what he did to the likes of Waldo, even to the likes of Andrei Arlovsky, to Justin Tafa, because as dangerous as Tafa can be, he's just not skill-wise, up in that echelon that seems to be past Rogerio's ceiling. I think Rogerio de Lima wins this fight 65 times to 70 out of 100. Give me minus 148, and I think by submission plus 550 or by decision plus 650 are both phenomenal numbers. If you're going Tafa, you go by TKO knockout plus 150. That's probably the best prop of the fight.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said, and my heart definitely says Justin Tafa. I love that dude. He just is there to swing and bang, and he's pretty damn good at it. But I think it's pretty obvious Lima has a big advantage on the ground, and if he can get him down, he could probably sub him. I don't know. I think you either have to go Tafa by KO or just De Lima to win.
And I love Rogerio de Lima because, he's been a very important part of the heavyweight division. Like the guys like him and Andrei Arlovsky, I feel like they've had good activity levels, which is not usual for heavyweight. And they're always a really good benchmark to put some of those prospects at heavyweight up against, because a prospect at heavyweight has so many more question marks than a prospect at any other weight class.
Oh, absolutely. And something that I've learned, and this isn't specific to this fight, but just betting in general. If you ever see a guy as a favorite who's making his UFC debut in heavyweight, fade them every single time. It'll work.
Wait, who does that apply to?
Oh, I can't remember the names. It was on the last card, I think. I'd have to look through it. It was the opening fight.
Was it Thomas Peterson?
It might have been. It wasn't the last card actually. It was Delidze versus Imavov, and I think it was Waldo Costa Cortez, was it? No, it wasn't. Oh, Jamal Pogues and Thomas Peterson. Yeah, you're right.
Who was making their debut at heavyweight?
Thomas Peterson, and he was the favorite.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, he fought in the Contender Series, so if you count that, then it was not his debut. But if you don't count it, then it was his debut.
Okay, I see what you're saying. And next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Rinya Nakamura and Carlos Vera. This is the heaviest favorite on the card by a really, really wide margin. Rinya Nakamura, Connor, is the minus 1350 favorite. Carlos Vera, the plus 800 underdog. It's like we're watching a fight on Top Rank on Friday night with those odds. Let's start with Carlos Vera because I have, kind things to say about Rinya Nakamura. Carlos Vera, 11-3 as a professional, 36 years old, making his UFC debut after a loss to Brad Katona on the Ultimate Fighter March of last year. Before that, his opponent's combined record in Fury FC, where he was not even the champion, was 22-6. So not a lot of experience between them. Then you look at Rinya Nakamura, 8-0 as a professional, 28 years old, was a college wrestler, I believe, at Sinshu University. Well-decorated wrestler, 5 career wins by knockout, 1 by submission, and 2 by decision. This guy now, if you count Road to UFC, has 4 wins at the UFC level. Now, if you don't count the Road to UFC, where he did dominate to the tune of a first-round key lock over Gugan Guzman, a first-round knockout over Shohei Nose, and then, UFC debut, round 1, straight left, knockout over Toshiomi Kazama. I believe that was like the Road to UFC finale. And then a unanimous decision win over Fernie Garcia last time out. He landed 36 strikes to Fernie's 15 and 4 takedowns to 0. So not as dominant against Fernie as he was in Road to UFC. That's to be expected. Fernie, a guy that gives everybody a tough outing every single time, but has lost 4 in a row now to the likes of Hyder Emil last week, Rinya, and former Tap That guest Brady Highstand. Shout out to the guy with the best first name in the UFC. Connor, what do you think about this one? Because I ended up betting Rinya Nakamura by TKO knockout and getting that at a pretty good number. Because I think that Carlos Vera is a much less significant test than Fernie Garcia is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think Nakamura takes it all day. And I think him by KO is definitely a solid choice. But I mean, at the same time, those odds are just absolutely insane. I don't know, just hearing those odds makes me want to throw some on Vera because something wild can happen. What if he pokes him in the eye and gets DQ'd? You never know. But I don't know. That's probably not the best mindset to have. So Nakamura.
Well, and Nakamura by TKO knockout at plus 120.
Oh, that's good.
How is that the number for a guy that's a minus 1350 favorite? Because I do think that he wins 85 to 90 of these out of 100. But
yeah, I agree. Okay, yeah, him by KO for sure.
But that's a lot more of a guess because Carlos Vera just has so little at this level. He's done well in the regional circuit. And what do you do with a guy whose only losses to Brad Katona, who can do that to people every time out?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird matchup, but those odds are just, those are pretty crazy. That sounds like odds that would put it in the top 5 upsets statistically in the UFC ever, right?
Well, Carlos Vera's plus 800. You got to think that, I don't know, what was Juliana? Plus 650? What was it?
Yeah.
It must have been close. And it's hard to tell because these lines start at different places and end at different places.
Yeah.
It would have to be, very close because you just don't see fights with these odds at the UFC very often.
Yeah, I definitely think it's up there. So we've seen upsets like that before. I guess not. This one isn't very high profile like Matt Serra GSP or Ronda Rousey Holly Holm, but it happens. So I don't know if you're feeling like it's an upset kind of night, maybe then you should throw some money there. But unless you're just feeling real frisky, I think Nakamura is definitely going to be the winner.
Honestly, remembering Vera from the Ultimate Fighter, I think that plus 800 is a lot, but
it is.
Those numbers are big enough for me to avoid an overall winner anyway, unless you want to parlay Rinya with something and go for a safety net wager there. And I think Rinya will be very popular on FanDuel and DraftKings this week. Next up, we got a light heavyweight matchup between Zhang Mingyang and Bridson Ribeiro. Ribeiro is the plus 102 underdog. Zhang is the minus 122 favorite. Zhang, 16-6 as a pro, 25 years old, 10 wins by knockout, 6 by submission. He's never won a fight on the judges' scorecards because he hasn't had to. He was a fighter at heavyweight, actually, in WLF MMA. fighting at 220 pounds. Yeah, always like in that catch weight range for the most part. One win in Road to UFC over George Tokos by first round knockout. Bridson Ribeiro, 15-5, 27 years old, 81-inch reach, 9 wins by knockout, 6 by submission, 0 by decision for him as well. He comes in from Shudo, Brazil, for at least for one fight that he won by first round knockout, and then got a first round TKO knockout over Bruno Lopez in the Contender Series. You know, I do think that a Contender Series win means a little bit more than a Road to UFC win for sure. But I think that both of those things are toss-ups. I really respect Zhang's, pedigree in WLF wars. He's a bigger light heavyweight as well. I don't, this one's very close, and the odds, reflect that. I think like Zhang is probably the guy I'd opt for. 55 out of 100, maybe 60. And I think that if you bet either of these guys, I think you go inside the distance, because Zhang inside the distance is plus 100. Ribeiro inside the distance is plus 120. The fight doesn't go to decision. That's minus 1100.
Oh my God. I mean, I might take those odds. I feel like sometimes we see two guys that, just absolutely crush people before they get to the UFC or the Contender Series, and then they fight with somebody of a similar skill level, and they're kind of tentative and they don't finish it. So I don't know. Maybe what are the odds for it going the distance?
Plus 550.
Yeah, I mean, maybe throw a few bucks on that, but yeah, I think this is a very close matchup. I do think that Brenton Ribeiro is. I mean, I'm watching some of his highlights right now. He's pretty good, but so is Min Young. So I don't know. This is a tough one to call. This is a tough one to call.
And I do agree that you do see a lot of guys when they get to the UFC level, it's like they pump the brakes a little bit. Some of that's, being nervous for the stage that you're on, especially for these guys being on the Contender Series and then Road to UFC and then jumping up to being on the prelims of UFC 298. It's going to be a big show. So I do think that is well within the realm of possibility. It's just like, despite that, I still don't feel comfortable betting either guy by decision. Like inside the distance odds at plus money, I really like. But, this is one where I'm just really interested to see, which one of these guys comes out on top, because they're young, but they're both young prospects for light heavyweight.
Yeah, I think Jean Min Young, he's had a more impressive recent win streak. I think it's like 9 in a row or something like that, all finishes. And he also, fun fact, he is ranked as the #1 light heavyweight in China by I can't remember which website, but by the website that ranks fighters like that.
That is a fun fact. You're right. And so next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Josh Keeneland and Danny Barlow. Danny Barlow, the minus 205 favorite. Keeneland, the plus 170 underdog. To start off with Danny Barlow, he got that first round knockout, a devastating one against Raheem Forrest in the Contender Series September of last year. Before that, I believe he was the champion in Cage Fury. He's 7-0 as a pro, 28 years old, has an 80-inch reach for that weight class. He was not the champion in Cage Fury, but still, he had several fights there. He's just super green as a pro. Like before the fight on the Contender Series that got him this fight, his last opponent before that in Cage Fury was 2-1 Jarius Gill. Then you go to Josh Keeneland, who is 1-3. Technically 1-1 in the UFC, because the fight in the Contender Series ended up being a no contest that was supposed to be for Keeneland. He beats Jason Witt by a first round knockout August of 2022. Lost the last time out by unanimous decision to Trey Waters April of last year. Trey Waters, who the only sample size we had of him before that was getting subbed early by Gabriel Bonfim in the Contender Series, which is easy to forgive. Connor, these numbers seem kind of crazy. Like, I think that this is Vegas trying to bait me or tell me that they think Danny Barlow is going to win, when in reality, I think that they think something completely to the contrary. I think that in this instance, you go Keeneland overall just plus 170. I think this might be a 50-50 fight. Danny Barlow can definitely knock people out, but his professional pedigree is just so raw. It is very hard to trust against a guy with a UFC level win against a guy like Jason Witt. So I would say give me Keelan plus 170. I think that number's fantastic. If you're going Danny Barlow, you go Barlow by TKO knockout plus 130. Connor, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think buy knockout at plus 130. That's those odds are just not that attractive to me. But winning at plus 170 at a fight that's these guys are both similar levels of inexperience, then I think I agree with you.
But that's an interesting one, and it doesn't even mean we're wrong. I think this fight is a flip of a coin. I think either, Keelan just is the better fighter and his experience wins out, or Barlow just ends up landing a left hand. I think that those things are both very possible. And given that, I'll go with the guy that's giving me plus money. And 2 fights remaining. We got a welterweight matchup between Oban Elliott and Val Woodburn. Woodburn is the plus 250 underdog. Oban Elliott, the minus 310 favorite. Let's start with Val Woodburn, 7-1 professional, 30 years old, a middleweight out of Jamaica, I do believe.
A landscaper in Florida too. Don't forget that.
And his nickname is the Animal. That's sick. 5 career wins by knockout, 0 by submission, 2 by decision. Came into the UFC from Combat Night Pro. That's where he'd spent his entire professional career. He got 2 really solid wins against guys with a lot of experience, and Wesley Martins, who was 17-8, and Louis Mello, who was 30-16-3. Those were back in 2022. Comes to the UFC July of 2023. He was I don't know, I called him a test subject against Bo Nickel, who knocked him out in the first round of UFC 290. Oban Elliott, 9-2 as a pro, 26 years old, a 72-inch reach. So that will put him, I guess we don't have a reach for Val Woodburn that I'm saying. Yeah, okay, Val Woodburn will have a 2-inch reach advantage. So Oban Elliott. For some reason, Tabology was not scrolling. There we go. There we go. He has 1 win on the Contender Series, but he spent, the vast majority, I think maybe in the entire thing, in Cage Warriors. Yes, he did. And a lot of his amateur career. Took a loss to Michael Fieglock, who we've seen around the European MMA scene for a while, back in September of 2020. His last loss is December of 2021. Since then, a 5-fight winning streak in Cage Warriors. Mostly, 4 out of those 5 wins have been by decision, and the last 4 have been by decision, including his Contender Series victory August of last year over Kayak Brito, in which he outstruck Brito 58-42 and took him down 4 times to 0. I don't love the odds on this fight. Maybe they're trying to steer us away from betting on this fight in general. But I think if I'm going Elliott, and I do think that he wins this fight 75 to 80 times out of 100, maybe closer to 75. It's hard to tell when a guy was in Combat Fight Nights Pro or Combat, whatever it was, which is an organization of some reputation.
So wait, so I got to jump in here because that is the organization that I fought a Muay Thai fight in. So take that as you will. I think Cage Warriors is probably a little better competition, so I'm gonna lean Oban Elliott here. But my heart says Val Woodburn. I fought in the same organization as him. I want him to get a win after that Bo Nickel fight. So I don't know, but I just thought that was funny when you said Combat Night MMA.
That is funny. I'm looking for you on Tapology right now. I can't find you.
Yeah, it was an amateur Muay Thai fight. I doubt it's on there, but hey, maybe I'd be surprised.
I'm like an Elliott here by decision. That is plus 250. I think that's a fantastic number. I think it's his 5th win in a row on the judges' scorecards. I just trust his professional pedigree way more than Val's, and I can't give Val that much credit for getting knocked out in the first round by Bo Nickel. What do you think?
Yeah, I gotta agree with you. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Val has some stuff that we just haven't seen yet, but I think Oban Elliott's probably just fought better competition and he's on a nice win streak right now. And I think him by decision is definitely a good bet. I don't know, maybe even him by KO. I haven't really watched many of his fights, so I don't know how his power is, but I mean, I think Val showed he's got some gaps in his defense in that fight against Bo Nickel.
And it seems like a fight that like Oban Elliott will dominate, and then he'll be a heavy favorite the next time out. And then like some of those other Cage Warrior guys, maybe he gets upset.
Yeah,
I just don't think it's this one.
yeah, I agree.
And the last fight, the first fight that'll happen on Saturday live from Anaheim, California. It is a women's flyweight matchup between Andrea Lee and Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick is the -185 favorite. Andrea Lee, the +154 underdog. Let's start with Andrea KGB Lee. Connor, she has lost 6 of her last 8 fights, including 2 3-fight losing streaks. I'm not going to say anything bad about Andrea Lee in this, because she has only had to fight people that are staples, veterans, ranked fighters at women's flyweight. And her last, her 3-fight losing streak now comes in decision losses, including 1 split decision to Vivian Araujo, Macy Barber, and Natalia Silva. 2 wins in 2021 against Antonina Shevchenko and Cynthia Calvillo. And the 3 losses before that were to the likes of Roxanne Modafferi, Lauren Murphy, and Joanne Wood. 3 people that can just beat you by decision any given time out. And 2 of those fights were by split decision. Very much the MO of those kinds of fights. Miranda Maverick, born in 1997. She's actually a few months younger than me, which is really weird to think about. She's won 3 of her last 4 fights. I question the validity, like the Jillian Robertson win back in 2021 was big, and Miranda Maverick is someone who has remained really active. Love to see it. Her 3 losses in the UFC are to Macy Barber, Erin Blanchfield, both by decision, and then to Jasmine Jasudavicius, and what was like a breakout fight for Jasmine, former Tap That guest Jasmine Jasudavicius, in June of last year. Now, but the win against Priscilla Cachoeira by 3rd-round armbar, that really signified like Miranda Maverick is kind of like has some momentum again, because when you beat Sabina Mazo and Shanna Young, it doesn't do a lot for me. When you beat Priscilla Cachoeira and you get back to, actually submitting opponents, when, it's kind of something we attributed to Miranda Maverick, but she wasn't actually doing a whole lot in the UFC. Then she kind of got back to it. I like to see that. I think you just have to give the credit to Miranda Maverick being the fighter that was more active. If her last fight was Jasmine, or if her last fight was the win over Shanna Young, I might be thinking Andrea Lee as the underdog. But that win over Priscilla Cachoeira, I think, was very important for what I think about Miranda Maverick moving forward. And she's still, she's 26. She's still young. And she has that many fights under her belt in the UFC. I think she wins this fight 70 times out of 100. I think -185 is a fine number. I'd probably go Maverick by decision. I think Andrea Lee avoids a submission. So Miranda by decision is +110. Next, I would just go inside the distance, because who knows, whether a submission falls in or not. Or, submission +450. I don't know. I think I'd opt for Miranda by decision. If I'm going Andrea Lee, I don't think +154 is enough for me to take her as a straight up underdog. She tends to get her, wins of late inside the distance. But Miranda tends to just lose close decisions. So I guess if I'm going Andrea Lee, I'm probably going Andrea Lee by decision +215. What do you think of the fight that is going to kick off UFC 298?
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think Miranda Maverick's got a bit of momentum going. I think she's a solid fighter. She's had some tough losses, but I just have not seen anything from Andrea Lee lately to impress me. I think Antonia Shevchenko is a decent win. I don't think it's a great win, but I think it's a decent win. But that was in 2021. So I mean, she's 35. She's on a 3-fight loss streak. Miranda Maverick is 26, and she's on a win streak right now. Even though it's 1 fight, it was a good win. So I'm taking her all day.
Well, folks, that is all 12 fights of UFC 298, and that is it for episode 124 of Roto Bowler's official MMA podcast. Have that. Again, I'm going to be making picks for things like One Fight Night, KSW 91. You can follow all my picks for other MMA organizations and major boxing events at RotoBrady on Twitter. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. I'll be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord doing the weekly DFS/sports betting Q&A from 4 to 5 p.m. on Saturday. Show up. Let's talk about the card. Connor, thanks so much for being here tonight. This is a string of some really fun pay-per-views that I cannot wait to, continue discussing. Folks, Connor's going to be back on the episode before UFC 299, and I'm going to have Connor, Bone Slone, and my brother Zach Grove on for the UFC 300 episode. Connor, thanks for being here tonight. Anything else you want to say to cap off the talk of UFC 298?
Yep, I'll go back to what I say on almost every podcast. And Dana White, give the fighters the ability to have sponsors in the cage, please.
There we go. Folks, have yourselves a great week. Enjoy the pay-per-view card this weekend. Peace.